The scorching sun of the Egyptian desert beat down on the arid land near the banks of the Nile River. It was December 1945, and the world was still recovering from the horrors of World War II. In this unlikely setting, a young peasant named Muhammad Ali al-Saman was digging the soil in search of sabak, a natural fertilizer, near Nag Hammadi. His monotonous work was suddenly interrupted when his shovel struck something solid. The metallic sound echoed through the air, piquing his curiosity. Muhammad Ali carefully removed the earth around the object, revealing a large sealed ceramic jar. With trembling hands, he opened the container, expecting to find gold or jewels. To his initial surprise and disappointment, the jar contained only old papyrus manuscripts bound in leather. Unbeknownst to him, Muhammad Ali had stumbled upon one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, the Nag Hammadi manuscripts. The 13 codices found by Muhammad Ali contained 52 ancient texts, most of them previously unknown. Among them were Gospels, Apocalypses, and philosophical treatises that would shed new light on early Christianity and challenge centuries of traditional biblical interpretation. Dr. James Robinson, a renowned American scholar, received news of the discovery with a mix of excitement and skepticism. He had dedicated his life to studying the origins of Christianity and knew that if these manuscripts were authentic, they could revolutionize the field. Robinson immediately organized an international team of researchers to investigate and translate the texts. Meanwhile, the manuscripts went through a tortuous journey. Fearing that authorities would confiscate his find, Muhammad Ali divided the codices among his friends and family. Some were sold on the black market, others were burned for fuel, and one was even used to light the fire in a local bakery's oven. It was only thanks to the tireless efforts of scholars and Egyptian authorities that most of the texts were recovered and preserved. As the first translations began circulating in the academic community, it became clear that the Nag Hammadi manuscripts were primarily Gnostic texts. Gnosticism, a philosophical religious movement that flourished in the early centuries of Christianity, emphasized direct spiritual knowledge, gnosis, over faith and doctrine. These ideas, considered heretical by the early church, had been largely suppressed and forgotten over the centuries. Among the most intriguing texts was the Gospel of Thomas, a collection of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, many of which were previously unknown. Unlike the canonical Gospels, the Gospel of Thomas contained no narratives about Jesus' life but focused on his esoteric teachings. One of the most provocative sayings declared, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." Dr. Elaine Pagels, a young researcher at the time, was fascinated by these texts. She realized they offered a radically different view of early Christianity, one that emphasized the individual search for spiritual enlightenment rather than salvation through faith in established doctrines. Pagels began to question why these texts had been excluded from the biblical canon and what this revealed about the power struggles in the early centuries of the church. Meanwhile, Dr. Bart Ehrman, another prominent scholar, focused on the historical implications of the manuscripts. He argued that the Nag Hammadi texts demonstrated a much greater diversity of Christian beliefs in the early centuries than previously thought. There wasn't a single early Christianity, Ehrman declared in a lecture, but rather Christianities in the plural, competing for followers and influence. The academic community buzzed with debates. Some scholars saw in the Gnostic texts a more authentic and spiritual form of Christianity, free from the hierarchical structures and rigid dogmas that would develop later. Others argued that the texts were late products of marginal sects and did not faithfully represent the teachings of Jesus or his earliest followers. As news of the Nag Hammadi manuscripts began to spread beyond academic circles, the public reaction was intense and varied. Many believers were troubled by the idea that there could be lost gospels that contradicted or complemented the familiar biblical texts. Conservative religious leaders denounced the texts as forgeries or dangerous heresies, warning their followers to avoid them. However, for others, the manuscripts offered an exciting opportunity to reconsider their beliefs and explore previously unknown spiritual dimensions. Study groups sprang up around the world, examining the Gnostic texts and debating their implications for modern faith. The impact of the Nag Hammadi discovery extended beyond religion. Historians saw the manuscripts as a unique window into the intellectual world of late Roman Egypt. Linguists delighted in the opportunity to study Coptic, the language in which most of the texts were written. Even psychologists, inspired by Carl Jung's interpretations of Gnostic texts, began to explore the manuscripts' implications for understanding the human psyche. As the dust of the initial discovery began to settle, it became clear that the Nag Hammadi manuscripts had opened a Pandora's box of historical, theological, and philosophical questions. What did these texts reveal about the true nature of early Christianity? How did they challenge our understanding of the formation of the biblical canon? And perhaps most importantly, what secrets did they still hold, waiting to be unlocked by future generations of scholars? As the sun set over the sands of Nag Hammadi, casting long shadows over the desert landscape, it was as if the past itself was stretching its enigmatic fingers toward the present, inviting us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the roots of one of the world's most influential religions. Over the years, the impact of the Nag Hammadi discovery continued to reverberate through the academic world and beyond. Researchers, now equipped with more refined translations and deeper contextual analysis, began to uncover layers of meaning previously hidden in the Gnostic texts. Dr. James Robinson, who had led the initial translation efforts, published a complete English edition of the Nag Hammadi texts in 1977. This publication opened the door to a wider audience, allowing everyday readers to explore these enigmatic writings for themselves. The response was immediate and intense. Bookstores saw a sudden surge in demand for books on Gnosticism and early Christianity. Meanwhile, Dr. Elaine Pagels continued her pioneering work, exploring the implications of the texts for our understanding of the development of Christianity. Her book, The Gnostic Gospels, published in 1979, became a bestseller, bringing the complexities of the academic debate to a broader audience. Pagels argued that the Gnostic texts revealed a surprising diversity in early Christianity, challenging the notion of a single orthodoxy that had existed from the beginning. What we find in Nag Hammadi, Pagels wrote, are not just alternative texts, but a radically different view of what it means to be Christian. These texts invite us to rethink the very nature of spirituality and our relationship with the divine. One of the most controversial aspects of the Gnostic texts was their portrayal of familiar biblical figures. The Gospel of Mary, for example, depicted Mary Magdalene as a favored disciple of Jesus, possessing esoteric knowledge that even the other apostles lacked. This raised uncomfortable questions about the role of women in the early church and why their voices had been silenced in the dominant tradition. The Apocalypse of Peter, another text found at Nag Hammadi, presented a radically different interpretation of the crucifixion. In it, Peter sees Jesus laughing and rejoicing above the cross while his physical body suffers below. This challenging vision of Christ's passion sparked intense theological and philosophical debates about the nature of suffering and redemption. Dr. Bart Ehrman, in his book Lost Christianities, argued that the Nag Hammadi texts forced us to reconsider the process by which the biblical canon was formed. What we have here, he wrote, is not just a collection of rejected texts, but evidence of a fierce struggle for the heart and soul of Christianity in its earliest centuries. The reaction from the traditional religious community was mixed. Some leaders denounced the texts as dangerous heresies that threatened to undermine established faith. The Vatican, initially cautious, eventually acknowledged the historical importance of the manuscripts but warned against interpretations that contradicted established Catholic doctrine. Others, however, saw in the Gnostic texts an opportunity to enrich and deepen spiritual understanding. Progressive theologians began incorporating insights from the Nag Hammadi texts into their sermons and writings, arguing that they offered a valuable perspective on the diverse and complex roots of Christian faith. The impact of the manuscripts extended beyond Christianity. Jewish scholars found in the texts fascinating evidence of the complex interactions between Jewish and Christian thought in the first centuries of the Common Era. The Gospel of Philip, for instance, contained intriguing references to Jewish practices and concepts, suggesting greater continuity between the two traditions than previously thought. In the field of philosophy, the Gnostic texts provoked renewed interest in Neoplatonic thought and the mystical traditions of the ancient world. Contemporary philosophers began exploring the implications of Gnostic concepts of knowledge, reality, and the self for modern questions of identity and consciousness. The discovery also had a profound impact on popular culture. Novelists, filmmakers, and artists found in the Gnostic texts a rich source of inspiration. Dan Brown's bestseller The Da Vinci Code, though a work of fiction, brought many of the themes and questions raised by the Nag Hammadi manuscripts into the global spotlight. However, not all reactions were positive. Conservative groups expressed concern that the growing interest in Gnostic texts might lead people away from true faith. Conspiracy theories emerged, claiming that the manuscripts were modern forgeries or part of a plot to undermine traditional Christianity. Dr. Karen King, a prominent scholar of early Christianity, addressed these concerns in a series of public lectures. What the Nag Hammadi texts offer us, she argued, is not a threat to faith but an opportunity to enrich it. They invite us to consider the possibility that the divine may be more vast and multifaceted than we previously imagined. As the debate continued, it became clear that the Nag Hammadi manuscripts had opened a Pandora's box that could not easily be closed. They had not only challenged centuries of biblical interpretation but also raised fundamental questions about the nature of faith, history, and spiritual knowledge. At universities around the world, new departments and study programs were established to explore Gnosticism and early Christianity. Annual conferences brought together scholars from diverse disciplines to debate the ongoing implications of the texts. Each year, new theses and articles were published, offering fresh and provocative interpretations of the enigmatic writings. For many, the Nag Hammadi manuscripts represented more than just a historical curiosity. They offered a glimpse into an alternative spiritual path, one that emphasized the personal search for divine knowledge over adherence to established dogma. In an era of growing disenchantment with traditional religious institutions, this message resonated deeply with many spiritual seekers. In the Egyptian desert, the site of the discovery became a pilgrimage destination for scholars, believers, and the curious. Visitors from around the world traveled to Nag Hammadi, walking the same sands where Muhammad Ali had made his fateful discovery decades before. For many, it was a journey not only through space but also through time, a tangible encounter with the mysteries of the past. As the sun set over the golden dunes, casting long shadows over the ancient landscape, it was impossible not to feel the weight of history and the enduring power of ideas. The Nag Hammadi manuscripts had not only illuminated dark corners of religious history but had also ignited a flame of curiosity and questioning that continued to burn brightly, challenging each new generation to reconsider their deepest assumptions about faith, knowledge, and the nature of reality. Here is my translation of the text into American English. Part 3: Legacy and Future Implications. Decades after the initial discovery, the impact of the Nag Hammadi manuscripts continued to expand, influencing not only the academic study of early Christianity but also shaping broader discussions about spirituality, philosophy, and the nature of religious knowledge. In the academic community, a new generation of scholars, inspired by the pioneering work of figures like Elaine Pagels and Bart Ehrman, was taking research on Gnostic texts in innovative directions. Dr. April DeConnick, a prominent researcher, proposed an approach she called hermeneutics of suspicion, arguing that even Gnostic texts needed to be read critically, considering the power structures and biases that might have influenced their creation. We can't simply replace one orthodoxy with another, DeConnick warned at an international conference. The Nag Hammadi texts challenge us to think more complexly about the history of Christianity, recognizing the diversity of voices and experiences that shaped its early development. Meanwhile, advances in technology were opening new possibilities for studying the manuscripts. Multispectral imaging techniques allowed researchers to recover text from previously illegible fragments, revealing new insights and sometimes entire texts that had remained hidden for centuries. An ambitious international project was launched to create a comprehensive digital database of the manuscripts, making them accessible to scholars and the general public worldwide. This democratization of knowledge led to an explosion of renewed interest, with passionate amateurs sometimes making surprising discoveries that had eluded the eyes of experts. In the field of theology, the impact of the Gnostic texts continued to reverberate. Many progressive Christian denominations began incorporating insights from the manuscripts into their practices and teachings. Some churches experimented with rituals inspired by Gnostic texts, seeking to reclaim what they saw as a lost mystical dimension of early Christianity. Reverend Dr. Sarah Thompson, an influential theologian, argued in her bestseller Gnosis for the 21st Century that the Nag Hammadi texts offered a valuable model for contemporary spirituality. In an age of ecological crisis and global inequality, she wrote, the Gnostic emphasis on inner transformation and the interconnectedness of all creation can help us reimagine our relationship with the divine and the natural world. However, not everyone welcomed these changes with open arms. Conservative religious leaders continued to view the Gnostic texts with suspicion, arguing that they threatened to undermine the foundations of traditional Christian faith. The debate sometimes became heated, with accusations of heresy being hurled at those who sought to integrate Gnostic ideas into mainstream Christian practice. Beyond Christianity, the Nag Hammadi manuscripts continued to exert significant influence in other fields. Philosophers found in the Gnostic texts rich ground for exploring questions of epistemology and ontology. The Gnostic concept of a layered universe, with hidden realities beyond the visible material world, resonated with some interpretations of quantum mechanics, leading to fascinating dialogues between scientists and religious scholars. In psychology, Gnostic ideas about the self and consciousness inspired new therapeutic approaches. Dr. Michael Kearney, a clinical psychologist, developed what he called Gnostic therapy, which sought to help patients uncover and integrate hidden aspects of themselves, echoing the Gnostic quest for inner knowledge. The influence of the manuscripts also extended into the world of arts. Painters, sculptors, and musicians found inspiration in the vivid imagery and poetic language of the Gnostic texts. Visual artist Marina Abramovic created a series of performances based on rituals described in the Gospel of Philip, exploring themes of transformation and spiritual enlightenment. In cinema, directors like Terrence Malick incorporated Gnostic themes and imagery into their films, creating works that challenged viewers to contemplate the big questions of existence and reality. Malick's film The Tree of Life, with its stunning visual explorations of creation and the nature of the divine, was seen by many critics as a modern Gnostic meditation. As the world entered deeper into the digital age, the Nag Hammadi texts found new life online. Discussion forums, blogs, and YouTube channels dedicated to Gnosticism flourished, creating virtual communities of spiritual seekers who gathered to debate and interpret the ancient texts. This democratization of esoteric knowledge led to creative and sometimes controversial interpretations, with individuals claiming to have decoded secret messages or uncovered new hidden meanings in the texts. Dr. Robert Jensen, a sociologist studying the phenomenon, observed, "What we're seeing is a kind of 21st century Gnosticism, where the quest for hidden knowledge has become a global collaborative endeavor. It's fascinating to see how ancient texts are being reinterpreted and applied to contemporary issues." However, this proliferation of interpretations also raised concerns about misinformation and cultural appropriation. Scholars struggled to find a balance between encouraging public interest and maintaining the academic integrity of their work. Conferences and workshops were organized to educate the public about the historical and cultural contexts of the texts, seeking to promote a more nuanced and informed appreciation. As the world faced increasingly complex challenges, from climate change to global pandemics, many found in the Gnostic texts a source of wisdom and solace. The Gnostic emphasis on personal transformation and the quest for inner knowledge resonated with those seeking a more holistic and spiritually grounded approach to the world's problems. Dr. Elaine Pagels, reflecting on the enduring legacy of the Nag Hammadi discovery in an interview marking the 75th anniversary of the event, noted, "These texts reminded us that Christianity, and indeed all religious traditions, have always been more diverse and dynamic than we often recognize. They invite us to embrace complexity, to question our assumptions, and to remain open to the possibility of new revelations." As the sun set once again over the sands of Nag Hammadi, casting long shadows across the landscape where the jar of manuscripts had been discovered so many decades ago, it was impossible not to feel a sense of awe at the enduring power of ideas. The ancient texts, buried for centuries, had emerged to challenge, inspire, and transform, their impact reverberating across time and space. The legacy of the Nag Hammadi manuscripts continued to unfold, a testament to humanity's eternal quest for meaning, knowledge, and connection with the divine. As new generations turned to these ancient texts, seeking wisdom to navigate a rapidly changing world, it was clear that the journey that began with the chance discovery of a young Egyptian peasant was far from over. The secrets of the Gnostics, once lost in the sands of time, now flowed freely through the world, inviting each of us to embark on our own quest for the hidden knowledge within and beyond ourselves.